Today is Saturday, July 19th. Americans are having fewer kids. So what's driving that change? Is it really a crisis, as some people say? And what, if anything, should be done about it? Take, for example, the so-called Trump accounts. They're part of the One Big Beautiful Bill just signed into law, and they provide $1,000 in a child savings account for every newborn. But will that really help spark a baby boom, as the Trump administration is hoping? What about other policies here in the U.S. and around the world? Today, I'm joined by Dr. Jane Waldfogel, a leading scholar in family and social policy. She's a professor at Columbia University's School of Social Work and a visiting professor at the London School of Economics. She spent decades studying how public policies impact children and families, and her latest book is called Child Benefits: A Smart Investment for America's Future. Today, she explains how serious America's falling birth rate really is, how certain policies may or may not shape family decisions, and where the U.S. stands compared to other countries. Welcome to the Newsworthy Special Edition Saturday, when we sit down with a different expert or celebrity every Saturday to talk about something in the news. Don't forget to tune in every Monday through Friday for our regular episodes, when we provide all the day's news in just 10 minutes. It's fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. It's time for today's Special Edition Saturday. You ready? Let's do this. Jane Waldfogel, thank you so much for joining us here on the Newsworthy.
My pleasure.
So first, I just want to talk about birth rates. They've been declining in the U.S. for the most part since 2007. My understanding is that the average American woman will have 1.6 kids over her lifetime right now, which, according to the data I've seen, is below the 2 or so kids per woman it would take to maintain the population through births alone. So there's debate about the potential impact of this. I'm curious what you think. Is this a potential crisis? What does the data show? What do you know about this?
It is true there's been a decline in fertility in the United States, and the figure you just presented is accurate. Just to put that in context, our fertility rate is still higher than our peer countries, the rich countries that are members of the OECD, and our fertility rate has fallen less sharply than it has in the other OECD countries. So yes, we do have declining fertility, and we should be concerned about that for a number of reasons. But if it's a crisis, it's much less so a crisis in the United States than it is in other countries.
And just help people understand a few of the basic reasons why people are concerned about this.
Well, you want to have a mix of people in the population. So you want to have a mix of working age people and children and elderly people who are not going to be working anymore and who are dependent on the working age people. So if we get to a point where we stop having working age people or have fewer working age people and have a lot more elderly as a share of the population, you can see where that's going in terms of things like the sustainability of Social Security or Medicare and what our national budget would look like.
Is there an argument on the other side? People are saying, well, because of climate change, we need fewer people to take up fewer resources. Is there an argument for having fewer babies?
Absolutely. A number of people would say that this is good news, that we're having fewer numbers of children. And that probably is part of the reason for the decline in fertility, is people thinking at this point, maybe it's a little bit irresponsible to have large numbers of children when, we have finite resources in our planet. And the more children you have, the more resources and energy they're going to use, and the more they're going to contribute to the climate problem.
So what are some of the other reasons people might be having fewer babies now?
There's fertility is such a complicated decision, and there are so many factors that go into it. So men's and women's employment rates affect fertility. Education levels affect fertility. As people become more educated, they have fewer children. The cost of housing is actually a big factor in fertility decisions. Around the world, especially, a lot of young people are still living with their parents because they can't afford their own housing. Well, it's hard to think about having children when you're already doubled up with your parents. It used to be that a woman's role was to be a wife and mother, and now women have other roles and other aspirations. And so maybe being a mother is not the be-all and end-all that it used to be. There's a sense from women that if they're still going to have to do everything as parents and be working as well, that's maybe not a bargain that they want to be getting into.
And speaking of working women, I know that's been some of the reason maybe people are having kids later in life, and then maybe they're struggling, even if they want kids, to have kids once they're older. Is that playing a part, you think, like the actual physical ability to have a child?
Absolutely. Nowadays, you really need two incomes to support a family. And so if both the parents are going to be working, it does make it harder to have children and harder to have large numbers of children. When fertility declines, one of the things that happens is people have children later. The later you put it off, the fewer children you'll end up having because you run out of time.
So, what policies are in place in the US or are not in place right now that might impact how many kids families are choosing to have?
Yeah, I'm glad that you framed it as what policies are in place or not in place, because really the issue is what policies are not in place. So the first thing would be some kind of paid parental leave. Among our rich counterparts around the world, we're the only country that doesn't have a national paid parental leave policy that provides some paid leave to mothers and fathers when they have a new child. And then once the leave period is over, most of our peers, all of our peers, provide some kind of subsidized childcare, and pretty generously subsidized childcare for infants and toddlers and preschoolers before they start school. And again, we're exceptional there. We don't. And childcare is very expensive. Whether it's purchasing childcare, or it's asking a family member to step in and help you out, or whether it's cutting back your own work so that you can take care of the child yourself, those are all expensive options. Then another way that we're exceptional is every one of our peer countries in the OECD provides some kind of child benefit, a child allowance, a monthly benefit that goes to every family or virtually every family with children, month in and month out, and helps families with the cost of things for children. And that could be books and toys, it could be clothing and footwear, it could be basics like food and housing. We're the only one that doesn't provide that. So, yeah, when you think about what kind of supports we provide for families with children, honestly, it's surprising that we're not at the low end of fertility among rich countries. We're having children in spite of the fact that we're really not getting very much government support.
We had talked about being less in crisis when it comes to families choosing not to have kids. And yet we don't have a lot of the same policies that other countries do. Why do you think there is that mismatch? Do these policies impact families' decisions?
These policies absolutely do affect decisions, and we know from research that if we had more paid parental leave, if we had more support for childcare, if we had child benefits, we would probably have higher fertility. The effects are not massive because there's a lot of other factors, as we discussed, but these things would make a difference.
Why do you think it's not making as big of a difference in the other countries?
I think there's just so many other factors that are happening. And also in those other countries, they've had these policies for a long time. So they've always had these generous supports for families with children. But what's happening now is that work is becoming more insecure. Work is becoming more precarious. Housing is becoming more expensive. So some of the factors outside of these family policies are changing in ways that affect fertility. The other thing I would say is it's very hard to study this because in almost any country you look at, fertility rates are falling. So a country will try a new policy, and yet fertility rates continue to fall. And so often they say, oh gosh, we tried it, I guess it didn't work. And of course, what they don't know, unless they really study it carefully, is how much would fertility rates have fallen without the policy being turned on? And maybe they would have fallen even more. So in a few of these cases, policymakers have pulled back on the programs thinking that they were failing. And then when the research has been done, it turns out that actually these policies were blunting the fall. And the fall would have been even worse had they not tried these policies.
Yeah, you can't exactly do a double-blind controlled study with this topic.
No.
Were there any lessons from the pandemic about how crucial childcare is for many families? I know many moms left the workforce when daycare options vanished during the pandemic. What lessons from that period are we able to take away about childcare or our economy, or what drives people to have kids?
Well, it's a super interesting question. And you were just saying we can't, for ethical reasons, obviously we can't run a double-blind, randomized, controlled experiment. But actually, we had what we call a natural experiment during COVID, during the pandemic. And what we saw was a really sharp fall in fertility because of the uncertainty about the state of the world. And because of health issues and health and safety concerns and the lack of childcare, and what we saw post-COVID pandemic was a rebound in fertility, a very sharp uptick of the pent-up demand. People had postponed having children and then caught up and had those children in 2021. So that was a perfect example of how social circumstances can affect decisions and can lead people to delay fertility.
Still ahead, we're digging into those Trump accounts that will give money to newborns they can access later in adulthood. But will that actually inspire families to have more kids? And what if it were more money available to use now? Our guest reviews the research on whether cash can move the needle on fertility. But first, a break for our sponsors. Have you ever used a website platform and given up because you couldn't get the site to look how you wanted? Some platforms have very strict templates where you can't break the mold, quite literally, and it can be really frustrating. But Wix.com gives you the freedom to build exactly the site you want for any business idea. And yet it's still just drag and drop, super easy and simple, no coding required. And you're not having to figure it out all yourself either. Wix does offer over 2,000 designer-made templates, but from there, they are fully customizable and they come with out-of-the-box business functionality. If you're looking to sell products or services, schedule appointments, and more, Wix.com has you covered with built-in solutions, no add-ons required. And if you want, there's an amazing AI image studio and tons of design effects. Wix has been pioneering in website tech for almost 20 years now. They understand web design and what it takes to run your own business. Ready to create your own website? Go to Wix.com. That's Wix.com to start building your website today. Thanks to Wix for sponsoring our show. The Newsworthy is also brought to you by Fatty 15. I'm feeling great about making C15 from Fatty 15 part of my daily routine because I want to do everything I can to age better. Their reports say C15 is the first essential fatty acid to be discovered in more than 90 years and that it supports long-term health and wellness. The company explains that when our cells don't have enough C15, they become fragile and age faster, and that as many as 1 in 3 people worldwide may have low C15 levels and cellular fragility syndrome. Well, Fatty 15 is clinically proven to raise C15 levels, resulting in lower cholesterol levels, healthier liver function, improved gut microbiome health, and improved red blood cell health within 3 weeks. It's said to have 3 times more cellular benefits than omega-3 or fish oil, which is a relief because Fatty 15 has no flavor or aftertaste. In fact, it's the easiest pill I've ever had to take, and it comes in this gorgeous reusable bottle with refills that ship right to my door. Fatty 15 is on a mission to optimize your C15 levels to help you live healthier, longer. And you can get an additional 15% off their 90-day subscription starter kit by going to fatty15.com/newsworthy and using code newsworthy at checkout. Again, get an additional 15% off their 90-day subscription starter kit by going to fatty15.com/newsworthy and using code newsworthy at checkout. Now back to my conversation with Jane Waldfogel. So what sparked the idea for this episode is what has been nicknamed Trump accounts, where the government will give $1,000 in an investment account for every eligible newborn, and then families can contribute up to $5,000 a year into these investment accounts. Do you think the president's desired impact of creating a baby boom will come of this, and why or why not?
So I think something funny happened along the way to this policy because originally what the Trump administration and some other people in government were talking about was something called baby bonuses or birth grants. This is if you have a new baby, the government gives you quite a large cash grant, let's say like $5,000. And other countries have tried this, Canada, Spain, Switzerland, Poland, South Korea, you name it. And these policies do move the needle on fertility. So if you say to people in the population, if you have another child or you have a child, we're going to give you this big one-time birth grant, that really does have an impact on fertility. And originally, that's what the Trump administration was talking about. At some point, they switched gears, and now they're doing something that's quite different. So these are what's called child savings accounts. And a really important feature of these child savings accounts is that they're savings accounts. So no one can touch the money in those accounts until the children turn 18 or turn 21 in some cases. So this is a way for parents to put aside money supported by the government so that when the child turns 18, there's like a nest egg that the child could use for higher education or to start a business or to put a down payment on an apartment. But there's no way that I can imagine that these child savings accounts are going to affect the decision of parents today to have children. You see what I mean? They might help the next generation 18 to 20 years from now when these grant holders come into the benefits. Maybe these help better position them in the future to have children themselves. But that's 20 years down the line.
And just to clarify, it's different from a 529 that doesn't have any sort of initial money in it, even though what I've read, the tax benefits might actually be better in the 529, but families have to put all of their own money in there, whereas at least they're starting with $1,000 in this account. Would you say that's right?
Yeah, so this is a classic, what's called a child savings account, and there's been a lot of research on them in the United States and also overseas. They're really designed to help provide some hope and aspiration for the young people when they're growing up. The theory is that there's this money set aside for me, and if I pay attention in school and if I work hard, when I graduate at 18, there's going to be this nest egg for me, and I'm going to be able to afford college or some kind of training program, or I'm going to be able to afford to start my own business or rent an apartment.
But for parents today that have to pay for daycare or childcare, this isn't doing anything.
It doesn't do anything, and they are prohibited. They're not allowed to take the money out. So you couldn't take the money out and use it to pay for things we've been talking about, for, that initial period of paid leave, or for infant childcare, which is so expensive, or preschool childcare, which is so expensive. So I've never seen any research that suggests that these child savings accounts would have any effect on fertility.
And you already said that finances is at least one aspect of families choosing to have fewer kids. Do you have any data or estimates of how much a child costs today in America?
There are some really good figures from the federal government. They do a report every year on the cost of children, and it's staggering. I mean, if you add up the cost of what it costs to raise a child, food, clothing, housing, books and toys from birth to age 18, it's in the hundreds of thousands. And I think that's why people have been skeptical of, is it really the case that if you offer someone a $5,000 baby bonus or birth grant, would that really make a difference? But the evidence suggests that it does. It doesn't have a massive effect, but it does. I mean, I should say the evidence comes from other countries. So the evidence comes from other countries where there's already generous paid leave, child care, and and child benefits. So we don't know what effect having these kinds of baby bonuses or birth grants would have in the United States. It could be that because we provide so little in terms of anything else, these baby bonuses could have a big effect because it's like going from nothing to 5,000. Or it could be just the opposite. It could be that because we don't have the underlying framework in the first place, that 5,000 is not enough to move the needle.
And just to remind people, that's not what's happening today. There's not a 5,000. Bonus,
No.
Right?
This is the proposal that originally Trump, I think, was looking at because they were talking about some kind of baby bonus or birth grant. And then, I don't know, maybe he talked to somebody who said, oh, what about a child savings account? And seemed to have switched gears into something completely different.
So looking ahead, how do you think policymakers in America will actually respond to declining birth rates? And what are you hoping to see in the next decade?
Well, I've just finished a book on child benefits, which every country but the United States provides among our peers. And I hope this will provide yet another impetus for us to implement a child benefit. It's such a sensible policy. It's a benefit for children. Families get it month in and month out. They use it for things for children. And I hope that the fact that it would also help fertility becomes yet another reason why we would think about having a child benefit in the United States, which certainly is long overdue.
And I'm just curious, why haven't we done that? What has been the argument against it?
I think there was a historical moment when all of our peer countries introduced these child benefits. And, it's quite some time ago. These things date back more than 100 years. And we missed that moment and built a different kind of social welfare system. And we also are slow in implementing these kinds of policies, whether it's health insurance or childcare or parental leave, as we've been talking about. This is not the only policy area that we lag behind. But I think we are catching up especially on child benefits. The child tax credit is now very popular across both Republicans and Democrats. And there's a number of proposals from both parties to raise the amount very considerably, to make it monthly, and to extend it to more families. And we even heard Vice President Vance during the campaign saying, I think we ought to raise this to $5,000 a year, and we ought to provide it to all families. It's not right that we exclude low-income families. So I think there is growing support for it, and I think it's a matter of when we'll get there, not if we'll get there. And the same thing for paid parental leave. It's passing through a number of the states, and I think at some point it'll become federal legislation. And childcare, likewise, will get there eventually.
Anything else you'd like to add, or just a final thought?
I think there's not as much of a fertility crisis as we sometimes hear. And on the other side, there's a lot that we could do about it. There's a lot more supports for families with children that we don't provide currently that we could provide that would help encourage families to have children.
And even if we were calling it a crisis, that alone probably wouldn't change individual families' minds, I would imagine.
Americans are very patriotic, and they love their country, and they want to do a lot for their country. But I don't think appealing to patriotism is going to induce people to have more children or have them earlier. But I think providing support for families, addressing housing costs, addressing paid leave, addressing childcare, providing a child benefit or a child allowance, those things really would make a difference in enabling families to have the children that they want to have and provide the kind of support that they want to have. We've been talking mostly about the numbers of children, but of course the other metric is the quality of children, how much families are able to invest in their children. And parents don't want to just have children. They want to have children and be able to really invest in them and do right by them. So for both of those reasons, we should be providing more support.
Well, thank you so much to Jane Waldfogel for sharing her expertise with us today. Her new book is called Child Benefits, A Smart Investment for America's Future. If you found this episode interesting or helpful, please consider sharing it with a friend or on social media. And as always, join us again during the week as we keep you in the know with the latest news and headlines in just 10 minutes every Monday through Friday. So we'll be back on Monday with the latest news to know. Until then, have a great rest of your weekend.